Welcome to SWIME Massive Open Online Course on Public Financial Administration. I am Dr. Vijayakumari Joseph, Associate Professor, Department of Commerce, Madras Christian College, Chennai. In this video, I will be presenting about the meaning, importance, objectives and components of fiscal policy. The word fisc means treasury and fiscal policy refers to policy concerning the use of state treasury or the government finances to achieve the macroeconomic goals. Fiscal policy involves the decisions that a government makes regarding collection of revenue through taxation and about spending that revenue. It is sister strategy to monetary policy through which a central bank influences a nation's money supply. Fiscal policy is one of the key tools that government attempts to regulate and influence the economy to achieve macroeconomic goal. In simple words, fiscal policy refers the use of government spending and tax policy to influence the path of the economy over time. It means the use of taxation and public expenditure by the government for stabilization or growth of the economy. Fiscal policy in India is the guiding force that helps the government decide how much money it should spend to support the economic activity and how much revenue it must earn from the system to keep the wheels of the economy running smoothly. In recent times, the importance of fiscal policy has been increasing to achieve economic growth swiftly, both in India and across the world. Attaining rapid economic growth is one of the key goals of fiscal policy formulated by the Government of India. Fiscal policy, along with the monetary policy, plays a crucial role in managing a country's economy. Through the fiscal policy, the government of a country controls the flow of tax revenues and public expenditure to navigate the economy. If the government receives more revenue than it spends, it runs a surplus, while if it spends more than the tax and non-tax receipts, it runs a deficit. To meet additional expenditure, the government needs to borrow domestically or from overseas. Alternatively, the government may also choose to draw upon foreign exchange reserves or print additional money. For example, during an economic downturn, the government may decide to open up its coffers to spend more on building projects, welfare schemes, providing business incentives, etc. The aim is to help make more of productive money available to the people, free up some cash with the people so that they can spend it elsewhere and encourage businesses to make investments. At the same time, the government may also decide to tax businesses and people a little less, thereby earning lesser revenue itself. The importance of fiscal policy in a nation like India, it is critical in increasing capital formation in both the private and public sectors. The fiscal policy is intended to mobilize a significant amount of resources towards financing its varied programs through taxes. Fiscal policy also contributes to raising the savings rate by providing stimulation. Fiscal policy strives to reduce the imbalance in the distribution of income and wealth by providing enough incentives to the private sector to grow its operations. In a country like India, fiscal policy plays a key role in elevating the rate of capital formation both in the public and private sectors. Through taxation, the fiscal policy helps mobilize considerable amount of resources for financing its numerous projects. Fiscal policy also helps in providing stimulus to elevate the savings rate. The fiscal policy gives adequate incentives to the private sector to expand its activities. Fiscal policy aims to minimize the imbalance in the dispersal of income and wealth. The objectives of fiscal policy is to maintain the condition of full employment, economic stability and to stabilize the rate of growth. The general objectives of fiscal policy are: in economy, those who are willing to work at the going wage rate but do not get job are called involuntarily unemployed. In a situation of full employment, all those who are willing to work get jobs and all are observed. If there is an unemployment in an economy, the government may adopt various expansionary measures for increasing income and employment. There are various ways of achieving this goal. Once full employment level is reached, it has to be constantly maintained by adopting appropriate fiscal measures from time to time. The second one is the economic growth. For accelerating rate of economic growth of the developing economies, fiscal policy can be used as an effective instrument. Economic growth simply means rise in national income as well as per capita real income over time. Less development and poor countries suffer from the viscous circle of poverty, and to break this viscous circle, a large dose of investment, or you can call it as big push, is just necessary. Government designed fiscal policy to raise the level of savings and to reduce potential consumption of the people. Different fiscal measures can be induced the process of capital formation and create favorable environment for rapid economic growth. In addition, the government can redesign its tax investment in those economies, a mounting investment on social overhead capital, development of roads and communication, generation of electricity, etc., which also creates a favorable environment for rapid economic growth. All these can be achieved by means of appropriate fiscal policy. The price stability. Various classes of society such as consumers, laborers and employees, agriculturalists, producers, traders, etc. are affected by fluctuation in prices. The general public is adversely affected by increasing prices. The fiscal policy endeavors to bring stability in prices by removing demerits of increase or decrease in prices. By removing a decrease in price, the impact of the price increases can be reduced by providing subsidy or decreasing taxes. Balance of payment equilibrium. When a country is engaged in international trade, then the country can get money, foreign currency, by exporting goods and services, and the country spends money for importing goods and services from foreign countries. The difference between the value of exports and imports is known as balance of trade, and if it is added to the capital account, then it is called balance of payment. If the value of export is less than value of imports, then there will be a deficit in trade balance and surplus. If opposite happens, in particular, if a country has a deficit in trade balance, then to correct such deficit, the government should encourage exports and discourage imports. For doing this, the government can grant different types of benefits and exemptions to export and impose hardships on imports. In this way, by increasing exports and decreasing imports, the problem of deficit in trade balance of payment can be achieved. The government can also accelerate the rate of economic development. Primarily, fiscal policy in a developing economy should aim at achieving an accelerated rate of economic growth. Therefore, fiscal measures such as taxation, public borrowing and deficit financing, etc. should be used properly so that production, consumption and distribution may not adversely affect. It should promote the economy as a whole, which in turn help to raise national income and per capita income. Optimum allocation of resources, which also is another fiscal measure like taxation and public expenditure, which can greatly affect the allocation of resources in various occupations and sectors. Public expenditure in the form of subsidies and incentives can favorably influence the allocation of resources in the desired channels. For example, tax exemptions and tax concessions may help a lot in attracting resources towards the favored industry. On the contrary, high taxation may draw away resources in a specific sector. Equitable distribution of income and wealth. Welfare state should provide social justice by giving equitable distribution of income and wealth. Fiscal policy can serve as an effective means of achieving this much desired goal of socialism in developed as well as developing countries. Progressive tax system can be of much use in realizing this objective. Moreover, public expenditure helps in redistributing income from the rich to the poor section of the society. Economic stability. Economic stability is another prime aim of sound fiscal policy. This goal implies maintenance of full employment with relative price stabilization. Inflation should be curbed and deflation should be avoided. In short, economic growth and stability are the twin objectives jointly pursued by a developing country's fiscal policy. The forces stimulating growth process should be given a boost at a time. While inflationary pressures are to be curbed, cyclical fluctuation. These fluctuations cause variation in terms of trade, making the most favorable to the development and unfavorable to the developing economies. Therefore, fiscal policy plays a leading role in maintaining economic stability in the face of internal and external force. The fiscal policy also aims at increasing the rate of investment in the private and public sector. The rate of capital formation in developing countries is very low due to unemployment and low per capita income. The viscous circle of poverty is main problem of these countries. Therefore, fiscal policy is adopted in such a way that it reduces consumption and encourages saving, which is used to reduce undesirable consumption in development. Fiscal measures promote economic stability in the face of short-run international countries. Fiscal policy is based on a fundamental idea that it can influence the total level of aggregate spending, which further influence the income of the economy, corporate bodies and individuals. There are 5 major instruments of fiscal policy which are used to maintain stability and growth of an economy, which is called deficit. To fund the deficit, the government has to borrow from domestic or foreign sources. It can also print money for deficit financing. The instrument component of fiscal policies are budget, taxation, public expenditure, public works and public debts. The government budget are the revenues and expenditure process of the government, which can be used effectively to maintain stability and economic growth. The taxation is a powerful instrument of fiscal policy, which means of which the government can directly affect disposable income of the people and hence aggregate demand of the economy. The government can encourage or discourage economic growth and can combat inflationary and deflationary tendency of the economy by applying suitable tax policies. Public expenditure is that expenditure incurred by the government to satisfy those common wants which the people in their individual capacity are enabled to satisfy efficiently. It thus tends to satisfy collective social wants. The appropriate variation in public expenditure can have more direct effect upon the level of economic activity than even taxes. It will have a multiple effect upon income, employment and output. Hence, by increasing or decreasing public expenditure, the fluctuation in economic activities can be checked effectively. Public works. Keynes, in his book General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, highlighted public work programs as the most significant anti-depression device. There are 2 main forms of expenditure: public works and transfer payments. Public work include expansion of roads, railways, hospitals, parks, irrigation, transport and communication, etc. Transfer payments include interest on public debt, subsidies, pension, relief payment, social security benefits, etc. All these activities affect the level of income and employment in an economy. Public debt. Public borrowings or public debt is nothing but loans taken by the government. When current revenues fall short of public expenditure, the instrument of public borrowing are in the form of various types of government bonds and securities. Public debt is a very powerful instrument to fight against deflation. It also brings about economic stability and full employment in an economy. By means of public debt, the government can meet unprecedented expenses during war, natural calamities and associated relief and rehabilitation work. In developing economies, it is the most important source of development finances. The seriousness of the fiscal problem facing the country is now so widely recognized that it is useful to put in some perspective. the attitude of government and economists towards the role of fiscal policy is entirely changed. The old conception of neutrality of public finance was given up, and the government adopted a new budgetary philosophy called functional finances. With the adoption of development planning, public finance has been assigned a positive and dynamic role for the promotion of economic development. Role of fiscal policy in developing economy: resource mobilization, development of public sector. Third one, optimization of resource allocation. Fourth one is creation of social and economic overheads. Fifth one is the balanced regional development. Sixth one, economic stability. Seventh one, reduction of inequality, and others. The following important roles to be played by fiscal policy for ensuring rapid economic development and growth in developing economies: to increase the rate of capital formation so that economic growth could be accelerated, to encourage saving and investment, to check sectoral imbalances so that regional disparities can be removed, to check extravagant and superfluous consumption, to reduce income and wealth inequalities, to raise standard of living of the country as a whole, and to uplift the poor section of the community. In developed countries, economic stability is achieved by regulated public expenditure, but it has no relevance in the underdeveloped countries. The fiscal policy in the advanced countries aims at maintaining economic stability, which is an essential condition of economic progress in developed countries, whereas fiscal policy aims at achieving accelerated economic development. Although economic instability occur in both types of economies, but the nature and extent differs. In developing countries, government plays a significant role in generating infrastructure, whereas in advanced countries, budget intends to establish balance between income and expenditure. In developing countries, taxation, borrowing, and deficit financing are used as a technique of mobilizing resources, whereas in underdeveloped countries, government uses other resources. In underdeveloped countries, government receipts are very low from low-term loans, but in advanced economy, national debt amounts to even 200% more than national income. Role of fiscal policy in developing economy: resource mobilization. Owing to acute poverty, the marginal propensity to consume is very high in developing economies. As a result, the level of saving is very low in these economies. Therefore, fiscal policy has an important role to play in mobilizing saving for capital formation through taxation and public borrowing. It can also influence capital formation and savings in the private sector through granting of various tax concessions and subsidies. Development of private sector. In a developing economy, private sector forms an important constituent of the economy. The production and productivity of private sector can be influenced by fiscal policy. Tax relief, rebates, subsidies may be granted to boost up the productive activity in the private sector. Fiscal tools and measures can be used to activate capital market to ensure availability of adequate resources for the private sector. Optimization of resource allocation. In developing economies, fiscal tools can be used or utilized to effect optimum allocation of resources. Very often, resources in private sector are directed towards the production of goods which cater to the requirement of richer section of the society. Fiscal tools can be employed richer section of society. Fiscal tools can be employed to allocate the mobilized resources in desirable channels of investment. Thus, process of reallocation can be done by various tax incentive measures and subsidy programs. Creation of social and economic overheads. In developing economies, there is the lack of proper development of basic infrastructures which are vital requirement for economic development. provision of social overheads like education and health service will directly enhance the productive capacity of the people. Expenditure incurred for the provision of economic overheads like transport facilities, power generation and telecommunication facilities, which will speed up the process of industrialization. Hence, government has to provide investments on building of social and economic overheads through fiscal measures of taxation and expenditure programs. Balanced regional development. Developing economies face the problem of regional imbalances in the matter of economic development. Fiscal tools like tax concession, tax holiday, subsidies, concessions in infrastructure utilization, etc., can be given to private investors to attract private investment in these backward geographical areas as part of the strategies for balanced growth. Economic stability. Fiscal tools such as taxation and expenditure programs can be utilized as an effective tool to control cyclical fluctuations arising during the progress of economic development. Taxation is an effective instrument to deal with inflationary and deflationary situations. Reduction of inequality. Provision of equality in income, wealth and opportunities form an integral part of economic development in developing economies. Fiscal policy has an important role to play in reducing inequality. Instruments of taxation must be used as a means to bring about redistribution of income. The various fiscal measures directed towards reduction of inequality in income, wealth and opportunity are progressive taxation of income and property, imposition of heavy taxation on luxury goods, tax exemption or concession to commodities of mass consumption, government expenditure on relief programs and provision of essential commodities at subsidized price through fair price shops to the poor sector, etc. Types of fiscal policy. Legislature can only have two types of major control over the economic and financial body of the country. One by discretionary fiscal policy and another by automatic stabilizers. Automatic stabilizers are usually used to adjust the taxes and spending on goods and products. They usually create fiscal actions in an automated manner if some specific conditions match. On the other hand, discretionary fiscal policies are one of those measures that are very commonly discussed and used by the government body. The government uses both monetary and fiscal policy to meet the economic objective of the country. Basically, the government has two types of discretionary policy opinions. One is expansionary and another one is contractionary. These fiscal policies are used according to the requirement of the economic phase, sometimes for the boom and sometimes to slow down the recession. There are three types of fiscal policy, which are the neutral policy, expansionary policy and contractionary policy. Let's first look into the neutral policy. Fiscal policy is said to be neutral when the level of government spending in relation to tax revenue is stable over time. This type of policy is usually undertaken when an economy is in equilibrium, neither rapidly expanding nor contracting. In this instance, government spending is fully funded by tax revenue, which has a neutral effect on the level of economic activity. Expansionary fiscal policy is when the government increases the money supply in the economy using budgetary instrument to either raise spending or cut taxes, both having more money to invest for customers and companies. Objectives of expansionary fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy is intended to boost growth to a healthy economic level, which is required during the business cycle's contractionary period. The government seeks to reduce unemployment, raise consumer demand and stop the recession. Once a recession has already arisen, it intends to end the recession and prevents depression. How does it function? By utilizing subsidies, transfer payments and tax cuts on wages, expansionary fiscal policy brings more money into the hands of consumers to give them more purchasing power. It also lowers unemployment by contracting public works or recruiting new government employees, all of which raise demand and boost consumer spending, driving nearly 70% of the economy. The other three common components of the gross domestic products are government expenditure, net exports, and investment by industry. Cutting corporate taxes but more money into the hands of companies, which the government hopes could be diverted into new projects and growing unemployment. Tax cuts generate employment in this way. So, if the company already has enough cash, it can be of use that the cut to buy back stocks or purchase new businesses. The supply side economics theory suggests reducing corporate taxes rather than payrolls taxes and support lower capital gains taxes to boost spending by the companies. Expansionary fiscal policy examples. The two significant examples include increased government spending as well as tax cuts. These policies seek to raise aggregate demand while lending to deficits or drawings. The decline of budget surpluses, they are employed during recessions or in the midst of one's worries to spur a recovery ahead of a recession. Contractionary fiscal policy is said to be in action when the government reduces spending and increases the tax at the same time in the country. The result of such a move is that there is very less money available in the market. It lends to reduction in the purchasing power, which results in declining consumption. As a less capital is available for business, the economy contracts and also causes unemployment. Contractionary policy is used to control inflation. It results in reduction of the aggregate demand and the consumption decreases, resulting in decline in purchasing power. It is implemented to keep inflation in check. Decrease in fiscal deficit is indicative of contractionary fiscal policy. Contractionary fiscal policy aim to hinder potential distortions to the capital market. Distortion include high inflation from an expanding money supply, which is unreasonable asset prices, or crowding out effects, where a spike in interest rates leads to a reduction in private investment spending that it dams the initial increase of total investment spending, while the initial effect of the contractionary policy is to reduce nominal gross domestic product, which is defined as the gross domestic product evaluated at current market prices, which is often ultimately results in sustainable economic growth and smoother business cycles. Thank you.